right now. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second online 11th annual Emcon Animefest, courtesy of the East Meadow Public Library. That's www.eastmeadow.info. I am here with two super cool artists. They are none other than Rich Bernatovech
How you doing?
and Javier Cruz-Winnick.
What's up? What's up?
There you go. Now, these two guys I've known for many years, but to those of you who do not know, why don't you introduce yourselves and tell the audience a little bit about yourselves and your projects that you're working on?
Good. Javier, you want to go first?
What's up, people? My name is Javier Cruz-Winnick. I am the author and illustrator of the A Reason to Smile series. This series came from a long line of efforts to try to bring my stories out and my art out. And I finally found a way to do that and making my own series instead of having to make everybody else's series. I finally found my voice and I let that shine through A Reason to Smile.
What about you, Rich?
Awesome. Like Javier, I wanted to have my own work out there. So I got into self-publishing and I started with a series called Sentinels. And I worked with an artist named Luciano Vecchio on that series. We did a whole complete beginning, middle, end, 4-volume graphic novel, 216 pages each. And we actually finished it, which a lot of indie people do not get the opportunity to do. So I was very lucky, and Luciano is becoming a big name within the industry right now. So I'm very happy for him and proud of him. He just drew Ironheart for Marvel, and now he's starting up on Champions for Marvel. And then after Sentinels, I did another series called Neverminds and with an artist named Jamie Faye, and a graphic novel, one-shot graphic novel, one and done, called Bugged, which I just signed a contract today for that to be printed in Spanish. So I'm really happy about that because the artist I worked with is from Argentina there. So I'm really happy that his fans will get to read that in, his native language. And then I have two other series, Quarantine and Blessed Sons, that are both more adult. And I have a kid-friendly, all ages webcomic that I took a hiatus from, but it's going to be picking up again, and that's called Koa, and that's free and online, and that's for all ages.
Wow. So just reminding everybody who's watching this live, there is a chance if you guys have any questions for the artists, just put them in there and I will read them as soon as I get them. But let's go with some basic stuff here. When back in the old days when I was young, or you were younger, Rich, they used to say comics were for kids. And then as time has gone by, you realize it's really not for kids. It's really all ages. It's really for everybody, because comics is just the medium where people tell stories of all different types. Right. When you were doing comics, when you guys were doing artwork, did you specifically decide, all right, I'm going to do a kid-friendly book, or did you said, I have a story to tell and then it's just going to tell itself? So we can start with Rich first.
For myself, with my first series, Sentinels, and diving in and starting to read comics as a kid myself and reading comics that weren't necessarily geared for kids, I didn't really think about that. So with Sentinels, although it is more mature readers, it didn't cross my mind to do it for a specific age bracket. After I did that, then yes, I considered, I would go to conventions and I would see that the demographic was a little, different than what I intend. Like I didn't think about it at first because I just kind of dove into it head first. So with my other series, yes, I really thought, okay, I need to change some of the language here. Maybe we can't show this. Maybe this is inappropriate visuals. So I knew how to gear my future titles. And with my webcomic, that one I specifically wanted to be very all ages and very accepting of anybody to read.
What about you, Javier? I know your book is specifically for kids, about kids. So what about you?
So one of the things I like to make sure people know is that my story is definitely all ages. It's marketed and geared towards kids, but I write the stories with a sophisticated lens. So we adults, when they read the story, they get something out of it as well. I don't do what they do with like Pixar or some of these other places that do really great stories, but do it where the adults can like get the joke while the kids just enjoy the entertainment. My story, like I want the kids and the adults to get the same message. I want them to have the same experience. And it all started from working with kids and seeing that there were stories that were out there that did not represent my community or my experience. I worked in a charter school and I saw stories from all over the world about people from Asia, from Europe, from Africa, from South America, even from North America, and but I didn't really see any books about people from the Caribbean, specifically Puerto Rican people. Not one story about a Puerto Rican character, not one story about a Puerto Rican star. So I said, I'm going to be that change. And that's one of the things that I do in my daily life. I'm always trying to be that change that I want to see. So in my stories, that's what I do. I put that effort forward to write the story that I haven't seen yet or I don't see enough of. So in being in the charter school system, not seeing this as something that the kids have as an opportunity to read, I said, okay, I need to start making this story and trying to make the story. How do I do that? Do I do it where um, I showcase somebody with superpowers? Do I showcase it with a boy, a girl? All these things start to come into my head, and um, at the end of the day, I decide that I need to make a story that we can all experience, something that you as an adult, be it a father, a mother, a grandparent. If you read the story, you can either see yourself in the story in the present day, or you could say, you can reminisce and say, I remember when I was little and I was that way, or I wanted to be that way. And then for the younger kids, they can look up to this character and say, hey, that's a cool character. She's a good role model. I want to see more of her. Um, so I learned really quickly that people don't want to hear stories from adults that can change their lives. Because if it doesn't line up with their line of thinking, it's pretty easy to dismiss. Whereas if you see a child going through it, you have a lot more sympathy, you have a lot more compassion, you can open yourself up a little bit more to that idea. So since that I believe that to be the case, I felt like a child being the star of the story was a better direction than having an older person, be it a teenager, be it a full grown adult. Younger children are easier to listen to, I believe. So
Oh,
that's, that's the direction I felt like I needed to go in.
so it's funny you mentioned how Pixar, or as the idea went in my head back in the Looney Tunes, where you had multiple layers of storytelling, that the adults get this stuff and the kids get that stuff, but you specifically went for all ages. How do you find that balance? How do you decide, well, that's too much going one way, that's too much going the other way? How do you find that balance to tell your story right down the middle? Javier, we'll go with you and then we'll jump to Rich.
So I'm a father now, but before my daughter was born, I was trying to conceive these stories, and what I tried to think about, I was lucky to be in the school system, so I got to see what the kids were dealing with, what they were encountering, and I started thinking about what would I tell my child when I have a kid? What am I going to tell my kid? Am I going to tell them the truth? Am I going to shy away from it? Am I going to shelter them? Am I going to help them be able to confront these issues so they're not blindsided by it? Um, that's the approach that I try to take when I write my stories. I try to approach the reality of it while at the same time not making it overt or overbearing. The idea of death is a very big concept, but if you can frame it around the fact that we all live, we all die, this has happened forever, and that you know there's a joy and a beauty to the cycle. You can frame the idea in the story to a way that a child can say, okay, I can appreciate that. I can see that. I'm going to be sad about it, but I can also find some beauty in it, and I can find some happiness because I got to experience something with this person that's no longer here. So I can at least be happy that I had that experience. Because like I see people who will post online and like they'll be sad about their relatives that's no longer here, and I might not have had that connection with. I might not have my that connection with that type of person in my family, like my grandparent or my aunt or uncle, and being able to have that experience is a beautiful thing. So if you can focus on the things that you had versus the things that you don't have, that's another way to, you know, touch on those issues and not make them something to cry about or something to lament over, or to even scar you. You know what I mean? Somebody put something in the chat about social issues, and I have that's again not something that's overt, but I've addressed it in that there's a part in part one where you see Luisa, who's the main character. She is happy that she was able to help somebody out, but then she sees somebody else that doesn't have the same ability to help themselves, like the person that she helped out previously, but she doesn't think that she has the ability to help this person in the way that they need. So this stems from homelessness. So it's having a child see a homeless person, it's like, oh wow, that person is homeless. They're going to look happy in what they're dealing with. What can we do about, what can I do about that? I'm only a kid. I can only do but so much. And you see how she's able to find some happiness in that, in her solution to solve, you know, her way of interacting with this homeless person. I don't want to give it away because that's part of the crux of the story, to show, you know, even though we find the happiness and the beauty in the world that we live in, what happens when you can't find your smile? How do you actively take steps to find that smile?
Oh. So Rich, what about you? How do you find the balance? And do your book tackle social issues as well?
Well, two-part question. Okay, so how do I find the balance? You know, when Javier was first talking, I remembered back to when I first started reading comics, and I was about 11 or 12, and I picked up on all the things that maybe weren't age appropriate for me, but even things that today they tell us, and specifically with comics, and this isn't like social issues or anything yet, but for example, DC Comics, they used to have Earth 1, Earth 2, Earth 3. They had Legion that were in the future. They had heroes that were in the past, and they would all interact. And I totally understood it. I understood that these characters are from this Earth and this one's this, and that's why there's three different Superman. And it wasn't, you know, a child or a young reader or an older reader, they all have that imagination that if you give them the information, they can understand it. So when I went about writing, when I try to do something that's all ages, I mainly think what would be offensive to a younger reader, and I try to avoid that, such as language, maybe violence and adult, you know, things. But when it comes to the range of a topic, you can get very dense. You can get huge with your storyline, because children and adults can both comprehend things. All they have to do is invest in it and learn it. So when I think about all ages, I like to think about that kind of a thing and think, when I was younger, I got it. Because today in comics now, like specifically we're talking about, I mentioned DC Comics, is they change everything to say, oh, people don't understand it. So we wanted to, you know, they did Crisis and they converged everything to a world. And then they're having to reboot everything over and over again to get new readers in. Whereas I knew there was a 50-year history before I read one of those comics. And I love that. I love that history. And I was only 11, 12 years old, and I got it. And so when I try to write, I don't dumb down my writing, but I just try to keep out stuff that I think is a little too mature for that. As far as social issues, yes, I mean, we did Sentinels. We first published first comic Sentinels in 2003. It came out. It was spawned from 9/11, because I was in New York for that and everything. And I'll show, this is a cover, but I purposely created a team that was very diverse. By the end of it, I think we had more Black, Spanish, and minority characters than we did white characters. And that was something that was very important to me and the artist Luciano Vecchio. We wanted to have a very diverse team, but we wanted to do it naturally, organically. So they didn't just get shoehorned together, and we just didn't make them into stereotypes. We had an openly gay character, which 20 years ago almost, when we came up with this, there really weren't any. And then with my other series, we have an all-female team. That was my book Neverminds. We took on issues of sexuality and stuff in there, and like, I want to keep this G-rated and all, but there were definitely adult topics. And with my series Koa, which is the all ages webcomic, even though that's all ages, and I'm trying to find a picture because I don't have a printout, so I just have so Koa is, I specifically wanted to create this character that didn't represent any kind of race. He was an alien, but the whole core of it is family and his tribe in a way, but there's one character, and she just talks regularly, and she said, "Oh, I gotta go check with her moms, because she has two moms." But we don't bring it up, but I want to get those things in. As far as social issues, and specifically like politics or things like that, I try to avoid a lot of things that are going on in the world right now, because I like my stories to be timeless. But when it comes to social issues, as far as race, gender, sexuality, I like to encompass all those. I try to stay out of politics a bit, because I think, and even like mentioning movies or movie stars or TV shows, because it dates my work. So I try to stay out of that kind of a range. Does that answer the question? Sorry.
It does to me. One thing that I wanted to, when you mentioned the diversity and the forced diversity, how do you guys decide, once again, that line where you're not preaching, you're educating? So, Rich, how do you do that?
Well, with Sentinels, I mean, I specifically, I wanted to see, I was doing what my life was. Like Javier was talking about his, I was in New York. I came to New York, when I was 21 years old, and I kind of just jumped into the mix, and I met a very diverse group of people. They were my friends. It didn't matter what color they were, what their sex was, what their sexuality was, what their age was. I still have friends that are like 30 years older than me. And when I did Sentinels, I said, I kind of used a lot of elements of friends of mine and brought them into that, and kind of made them into this team. So when I created the characters, they came from my heart, and the characters fit together organically. And when Luciano came into it, he added another element of his own personal experiences, and the characters really came to life. And it didn't become about a forced diversity, because I really didn't plan. The team evolved through the 4 issues, and I know, so, a couple of you guys have read it. The team at the end is different than the team in the beginning, and that wasn't really a plan. It was a natural evolution. So I don't like shoehorning characters in. I like characters to stand for themselves and not take place. I don't like when they have, I don't like 20 different versions of Superman, 20 different versions of Batman. Yes, if you're Green Lantern, there could be many versions, but I think create a character's own identity. I love that. I want to know as many characters as I can. I want to have as many different characters as I can. I love drawing. I love writing. I love reading. I love going to the movies.
So what about you, Javier? How do you decide, or how do you make it so that way you don't, or do you want to be preachy? How do you find that line, that balance?
So naturally, I am a preachy person. So that's something that I know as I write these stories that I now want for mass consumption. I need to dial that back. I have to be cognizant that that's who I am, and address that in a way that will make sure that people don't feel that way. They don't feel that pressure. They don't feel that overbearingness that can come from being preachy. So what I try to do is, instead of being preachy, what I do is I just think of, how do I include people in a way that haven't been included before? A lot of this idea of diversity, and this idea of acceptance, or all those buzzwords that people use to make or take away from the changes that are happening. It's all about just equity. It's not about equality either. It's about equity. It's about being able to have the opportunity to do something in the same way that somebody else has had that opportunity to do it. So as a Puerto Rican person, not seeing any books in my school's library, rarely ever seeing them on any stands, there's no equality or equity. I'm not included. My ideas, my story, my life, people that I live with, live around, haven't been included in those ways. So what I do is I say, okay, you've had the opportunity to be the star. You've had the opportunity to um, have these type of adventures. So now I'm going to put somebody else in the mix that hasn't ever had that opportunity. They're now going to be in mainstream America. They're going to have an opportunity. If you take my book seriously, you'll now have an opportunity to see this person in this light. Um, and it's not about, you know, trying to shove something down someone's throat. It's just about presenting a new story, a new side of things. Because for a long time, the only story about Puerto Rican people was West Side Story.
Mm.
Think about that.
Yeah.
A Puerto Rican person, you think of a thief, you think of someone with a knife, you think of somebody in a gang. Where's the story of the Puerto Rican superhero? Where's the story of the Puerto Rican banker? Where's the Puerto Rican love interest that isn't a machismo stereotype? You know what I mean? Like that's the idea that I come with any of the stories that I write. So I've written 2 volumes of my graphic novel. I've written a board book. I'm now getting set to publish my first short story that's now a spin-off of my main series. And I'm also writing a novel. I got about 27,000 words into my novel. Um, so I'm trying to tell a lot of these different stories to allow for a lot of different people just to have a spotlight. So it's not about diversity, it's about just seeing the world. It's about we live in this world. We don't just live in America. You don't just live in the state you live in. You don't just live on the block you grew up on. You live in a world that is influenced and touched on by so many. We have like 7 billion people on this world. You know
Huh?
what I mean? So there's 7 billion stories to tell. So that's what I try to do. On the cover of my second book, I made sure to include people of various backgrounds, facial, appearances, ethnic appearances. Like you can see a Hasidic Jew getting up from his seat in the train station. You've got somebody that could be from various different countries. You got a man with a turban. You got a Sikh on the train. These are people I see on the train every day. These are people that I experience, that I walk down the block and I see them all the time, but yet I don't see them in stories. So I'm including them. That's where Reason to Smile is, not forcing anything, but bringing stuff into the world so that way you can see something that you may have never seen before.
Okay, we have a question in the chat. Javier, love the title "A Reason to Smile." Who came up with that?
See that smile? So now, in all seriousness, like I'm always trying to find the bright side out of things. I don't care what I'm going through. I don't care what you're going through. We all have something that we can be happy about. The fact that we have this technology that we could be on the screen right now, we couldn't do that when we were kids. That's something that we have as a privilege, right? The fact that I have internet, I have my modem right over there. Some people don't have that. That's a privilege. That's something to smile about. My school, I work in a charter school now where they made the effort to make sure every single scholar had a laptop, and if they didn't have Wi-Fi in the house, we sent them a hotspot, all kinds of things like that to make sure that they were able to be online and we could teach them every day. Another reason to smile, even though they might be going through whatever they're going through, and that's what I want to focus on, because there's so many stories where somebody gets punched in the face. There's always a story where people have superpowers and they're special because of all these things that have been bestowed upon them. And now they're these grand creatures and characters. And that's great. That's fun, right? But where's the story about why you are amazing? Where's the story about why you're special? Because we all are special. I don't care what people want to say about this, the idea of everybody gets a trophy. That's not That's not me. But I do recognize you have something to offer that I do not. Every single person on this Zoom call has something to offer that I do not. You're special. And I want to talk about that. I want to put that in my stories. I want people to see that. I want us to celebrate instead of grieve. I want us to be happy instead of sad. These are all the things that they play out in my mind all the time. So I want to put them in my stories.
Oh, so we have another question from the chat. It says, Rich, can you give us a taste of the characters in your book, and who do you think is the most inspiring in Powers?
That's a good question.
A taste of the characters that are in my book. Well, I'll just deal with Sentinels since that's the one that's complete right now. So you have many different characters. You got Gospel here. She can teleport. Firebomb. She has fire powers. I don't know if you can see this. Phaser. He can walk through walls. Crusher. He's a big, strong guy. We kept them a little generic in their powers and stuff. Harlot, Electron, Splash, Serpenta, Sin, and the leader of the team was Templar. And the reason we did that is we connected it with, I love mythology and religion and things like that. And we connected that all in here. And so we have a connection with the Templar Knights. So we dwell upon real history and brought it to the, current time. But with the characters, what we really based everything is we wanted to make them a family that were not connected by blood. They were a family forged by necessity and by the fact that they liked each other, So you have, I'm just trying to give you a little things like that. You have a lot of the characters that bonded with each other, out of friendship, out of life experiences, and out of growing up together. Things like that. And what was the second part of that question?
It was, can you give us a taste of who's you think is the most inspiring and the power? So who's the most inspiring?
Wow. The most inspiring. Well, I mean, without giving anything away, there is, and for those of you that have read the book, the end of our series, I came up with Sentinels and had the end in mind. So I had the beginning and the end in mind. So I knew exactly how I wanted to end it, which is a little unorthodox with what we did, and why there'll never be a sequel per se, is that there is a sacrifice at the end, and it's not just one person, and it's not just for one reason. It's for it has to do with family and just the bonding that they all had for each other. So I would say the characters who make the ultimate sacrifice in the series are the ones I feel are most heroic. And we had people writing to us and telling us that they cried at the end of this series, telling us that they couldn't believe we did this and that. But it was natural and organic. And I loved that even the characters all my characters are flawed. Every single one of them are flawed. They all have issues. And they all go through a major arc, which is something that we juggled throughout the 4 books. We were able to, because we had the beginning and the end mapped out, we had just had to get there. So we were able to have fun with it throughout the whole 3.5, 4 years that we worked. We did this within 3.5, 4 years. And things evolved and changed, but every single character grew. And I have to say that, they were all very heroic. I mean, it's really the only superhero book I've done, because I don't know what else I would tell. I don't know what other story. I got everything into a superhero book that I ever wanted to do, which is family, friends, retribution, sacrifice, heroes, superhero capes and stuff like that. So without giving away too much, I think that there are multiple characters in the Sentinel series that are heroic and that people really related to. I mean, we had a really big following. We even had like figurines made. People, we have tons of fan art in each of the books. It was really inspiring to the feedback we got. And yeah, I hope that answers the question. I don't know.
It does. You're doing fine. We actually have another question in the chat, but I want to bring this up before I get to it. You guys both grew up in Manhattan. You said you were both in Manhattan and New York City. Do you think that your stories, or would you be telling different stories if you did not grow up in New York City or Manhattan? So I guess, Rich, you can go first.
I did not grow up in Manhattan. Actually.
You said 21. That's
21. Yeah, but
I didn't grow up at 21.
Yeah, I actually would go to New York when I was about 14. Is when I started going to New York. Actually met George Perez. We actually went over his house. I became friends with somebody over what they called an APA, which is an Amateur Press Association, which was a fan club for the Teen Titans. And they had people from all over the world. And I became friends with one of the people who was the same age as me and who lived in New York. So my parents would allow me to take the train, or they just didn't know. And I would go into New York, and I loved it. I just fell in love with it when, I was, like I said, George Perez invited us over his house, a bunch of the fans. His wife cooked lunch for us. So I really didn't grow up in New York, but I loved it. I was in awe of it. I wish I had grown up in New York, but I think having a suburban upbringing, even though, my family, I come from a divorced family. So I didn't have the cookie cutter, family. But I had what I needed and what I got. And I think it definitely it impacted my writing, and my love for New York is there, but I can't really say it influenced it the same way probably it influenced with Javier.
So what do you think, Javier? Did you grow up? All right. So
I've been in New York since '86. So I was born in the military. My father was an Air Force staff sergeant, so I was an Air Force brat. I was born in Minnesota, lived in Hawaii, lived in Florida, lived in Holland, and then we came back to the city, and I lived in the city since '86. And I growing up living outside the city for the first 8 years of my life did definitely influence a lot of what happened afterwards. But I'm a city boy. I was supposed to be in the city. I ended up in the city, and I've come back to the city. So even after college, I went to college away from the city, came back. I had to be in New York. It absolutely influenced every aspect of my story. I love the idea of Gotham and Metropolis being a character in the story, and I feel that is there because of how New York is a character. So I make sure to include places in the city in my stories. The first book takes place around Rockefeller Center, around that area of the city. My second book actually travels from that part of the city down to the Lower East Side where I grew up. You actually get to see the building that I grew up in, and the block that I grew up on, and see the difference between how Midtown looks versus how the Lower East Side looks. So yeah, I definitely understand the idea that your life begins and is molded by where you grew up from, your circumstances, your area. If I was born in China, I couldn't have the same story. I might have the same idea, but it would be executed completely different. If I grew up in Germany, if I grew up in, Ghana, if I grew up in, New Zealand, wherever, that place has its influence, from the food to your daily walk of life to the people you encounter to what the mores and the morale and the way of life is. That's gonna either push you in that direction or it's gonna push you away from it. Um, Being in the school that I was in while I was influenced by to write the story played a part in it. The fact that kids were being either told a certain thing or they were saying certain things, those experiences then fueled my creativity to write about those ideas. So yeah, for sure, New York City is absolutely a tremendous influence in my life and in my writings.
all right, so let's see. So the question of the chat, it says, Javier, can you tell us one of the plots of your book, provide without spoilers, of course? What are the challenges your characters has to face and that the people would now relate to?
So I'll tell you all three books in like 3 or 4 sentences. I'll give you my convention spiel.
Actually, can you do the screen share and show the images while you're doing the spiel?
Absolutely. Let me get it loaded on in Photoshop. So long story short, A Reason Small Volume 1 is about a little Puerto Rican girl from the city named Luisa Brillante, and she is a walking silver lining. So she likes to use her creativity and her imagination to help people find their smiles and help herself do the same. For volume 2, actually, so the plot for volume 1 is basically how do you go about New York City and find your smile? What do you see in the city that makes you happy, that can, make you want to be there? And when situations come up that you might not know how do you handle it to still come up with uh, a happy vibe afterwards? So in volume two, she wants to go see her friends. So in trying to see her friends, she encounters a couple of obstacles, be it in the house, to then being in the street, in the transportation to her friends, and then finally when she sees her friends, she's got to deal with a bully. So what does she have to do to still find her smile in the midst of all of those different circumstances? So that's the rundown for volume one and volume two. And then I also have a board book because I realized that a lot of parents were walking by my table and said that their babies are too young to read my books. So I decided to make a board book. And in the board book, the crux of it is what happens when you go outside to the park and try to make friends. Can you do it? How do you do it? And what are the benefits of doing it? So it kind of like inspires our kids to get out the house, get off the technology, and to enjoy the world that they live in. Trying to load
You,
these.
you got the screen share up? You got it? Oh, you can't see it. You can't see it yet, according to the
But
chat.
there we go. Right now. Oh no, wrong button. There we go. So this is volume one.
Oh, look at that.
So this actually is. I'll give a no prize to whoever can figure out that in the city. Give a 10-second countdown. Write it in the chat. If you know what this is at, write it in the chat. Let's see who knows it. Put my little teacher hat on. Oh, I see one person's in the chat. Let's see if you got it right.
Okay, so
All right,
I have my limited computer knowledge has no idea what's going on my screen right now.
do you see the
Yes.
reason with the girl and the turtle?
Yes. One guy says New York. I like that one. I like that one, New York. One guy says Fifth Avenue.
Kelly's getting close. Kelly's actually close. 5, 4, 3.
You got
2.
Park Avenue.
Yeah, you got it. So it is Park Avenue. It's actually on 21st Street and Park Avenue. And if you look down, you can see. Let's see if I can get my laser pointer. So I have the screen sharing capabilities. Nope, it's not popping up. Okay, so this is Union Square. So you see the circle, the smoke would be coming from here. You got the clock on the left, and then what used to be Virgin Megastore and now is the Citibank, I believe. Down to the right. And like Rich was talking about, to avoid dating my material, I didn't include the Virgin Megastore that used to be there because that would have dated it back to the early 2000s. But that's one of my major memories of that area. I always carry that with me when I go to that area of the city. This is actually the front and back cover. All my books are front and back covers. So whenever you turn to the back, you continue to see the artwork that's a part of the story. So right side is the cover, the front cover, left side is the back cover. A Reason to Smile, Making Friends. You see Louisa as a younger child. She's 5 years old here instead of being 10, like she is in the other stories. And here she actually meets these kids for the first time, whereas in volume 2, we meet them for the first time. So in volume 2, she's meeting her friends. In this third book, we get to see the origins of that meeting because she decided to go out to the park and play in the park, and her parents are along for the ride. Part of that motivation, like you were talking about with New York City, the fact that I'm a new father, while I was creating this particular story, influenced the way that I told the story because I don't see many stories about dads in most children's books. It's usually with the mom and the kid. It's usually just the kid. It's a lot of times it's a boy. It's not always a girl, or it's not even usually a girl. It's usually a boy, or it's usually an animal. So now here's a board book that's in the world that stars a Puerto Rican child. She's got another Puerto Rican friend, Jamaican friend, friend that's African from Ghana, a Chinese friend. You get to see the fathers of some of those kids in the story as well. So you can see more dads present in stories to inspire other fathers to be more active with their children, to be with their children. Because a lot of times dads don't get involved because they don't know what to do. They don't see themselves in media. They don't see themselves in stories. And this is across the board from all cultures. It's not always something that we see as often. So the more you get to see that in the world, the more you have information to guide your steps in doing what it is that you're going to do. So I decided to include that in my stories.
So we got another question in the chat. Question for both. How long does it take to finish one book, and how do you time and manage it? So, Rich, start to finish. How long does it take you to do one book?
It varies depending on who you're collaborating with, or if you're doing it all yourself. With Sentinels, Luciano and I did one 216-page graphic novel, just the two of us, within a year, and that's writing, drawing, inking, lettering, and then formatting the whole thing. So that took us about a year, and in one case it was, I think, we did it within 9 months. So that's really, really fast. Another one, I'm not going to name names because some of the artists drop the ball and they disappear. There's two series I have that aren't complete, and it's not because of me. So I'm not kind of at the mercy of other people. And I learned to do as much as I could. So writing, and then with Sentinels, I inked it, and then from there, when I started working on the other stuff, I started lettering. I learned how to letter and format, and I already drew. I do draw, but to write, draw, letter, ink, and then now coloring. I started coloring. Coloring my own art. It takes a lot, so that can take months just to do one 22-page book. So it really depends on the time you have. Like, Javier has a young child, and that's important. That takes up time. If you have a job, you have a family, those things impact it. So it really depends how much free time you get and who you're collaborating with, I think. But learn as much as you can, because it's hard to be dependent on other people, because life happens, and sometimes people get pulled out of your plan for unexpected reasons. So the more you can do on your own, the better it is, but it's going to take time. Nothing happens overnight, and just keep working at it, I guess.
What about you, Javier? How long did it take you to do the books?
So I began creating my books in 2012. My first book was done about 2.5 years later, in 2014. That was pre-child. With all my own efforts, it was my first book. It was my first effort to do everything and be a self-publisher, and actually be a publisher, because I did the pencils, the inks, the writing, the editing, the design of the book, the logistics of getting it printed, then finding a way to get it out to the world. All of that takes a lot of time. A lot of that takes a lot of effort, especially if you've never done it before. So even to do the Kickstarter to get it funded, we could talk about that later. That also took another month just of research to figure out where my book lined up with other books, to find out what my budget should be to meet an adequate goal, where people don't see it and think that I'm being crazy, or that I'm not, I'm selling myself short. So, those are factors that play into trying to figure out how to get this done. With that being said, I learned a lot in those 2.5 years. So my second book, Pre-Child, took me 1.5 years versus 2.5 years. So it was a year faster, 4 pages more, much higher production value in terms of the actual art and the story. So I went from a 44-page book to a 48-page book. I went from a 60-page hardcover to a 70-page hardcover. And one thing that Rich didn't mention is that this also hinges on us having the time to, and it goes back to the question of time management, this also hinges on paying our bills. So if we're, Rich was working a full-time
job. I said a job. Yeah, you got to have your job.
Rich, tell people where you were working at the time.
Oh, I was working at the New York Times.
So the high demand that would have taken. And Rich he wasn't a grunt. Rich was up there. He was actually.
You don't sleep much. You want to do this, you can't sleep much, right, Javier?
Yeah, for sure, for real. You know, this needs to become your life. And I tell my students all the time, if you want to do something, you have to live it. You can't just say, "Oh, I want to be a basketball player," and just play basketball once in a while. If you want to be a basketball player, you got to play every day. You got to practice different things that are not something that you're comfortable doing. You got to go outside your frame of reference and your box to be the best at it. So way other people see that and then want to, you know, pay you for it. So it took me 2.5 years to 1.5 years to then saying, okay, now my daughter's born. After like trying to market the book, getting it out to conventions, going to book fairs, trying to get it into comic stores, trying, you know, those logistics now. So now I'm not creating, I'm actually administrating, being an administrative assistant, an office assistant and whatnot. Trying to get all these things done that are not making a book. It's not trying to get you to buy the book. So that also takes a lot more time. So then my daughter's born. I haven't figured out how to make another comic yet. So I said, you know what? She needs a board book that's going to show what she can do in her life. I need to do that for myself. I need other fathers to see what I need to see. So now go in that direction, build a whole new story. It took me about 9 months to make that book. That was a board book, right? What I learned about myself is that if I get paid to make these books versus me trying to hustle and make a living off of these books, if someone is saying, I'm going to give you a book deal, go make art, go make stories, I can make at least a book a year at the very least. And that's taking on every responsibility from writing to inking to, you know, not to wait for somebody else like Rich had to with other artists, not having to depend on their schedule all on my own. I could do that at the very least once a year.
Wow.
If I got paid for it, again, I could even push myself to do like what they do with like Scholastic and with Penguin, how they create like, you know, 100-page graphic novels. I could do that. I could do that, but I need to be paid to be able to do that. I need to have, you know, the opportunity to take care of my bills and feed my daughter and, you know, maybe go out to dinner once a year or something, you know?
Get the extra cheese on the pizza.
You know, another interesting thing to mention, not so far as time management, but what's interesting between Javier and I is that when we started the comic convention scene and as indie creators, artists, writers, and I started with just my book. All I had was a book. Even though I could draw and do all that stuff, all I had was a book and I had nothing else. Javier was actually doing art. So he started, right, Javier? You developed a following through his art that way, as where I was the other way. And then I started doing art after, and that brought people back into my stuff. So we kind of worked a little bit the opposite in that way. As far as like time management, sometimes you're in between things, but you have to develop this audience and you have to bring people in. And sometimes you can bring them in through your writing and your books, but also your artwork, because, you know, if you've ever seen Javier and I at conventions, we both have artwork as well as our books.
And that's also another thing that has to be considered when it comes to living this type of life. You have to be able to set aside time for the art, the visuals, because reading takes a lot more time than just looking at a pretty picture and saying, I like that, I want that on my wall. Mm-hmm. That's a split-second decision. Oh, that is amazing, I need that. Whereas if you write a story, it's like, I got to understand what you're writing. I have to get your motivation. I have to understand if this character is doing the right thing, if they're leading the story in the right way. There's so many more factors that go into reading a story versus looking at a piece of artwork. So if you don't have, like how Rich had a book, you all know, if you see a book, oh, that's a great book. I don't have time to read that. I'm gonna go look at this other stuff.
Yep, they kept walking right by. That was the thing. So you have to have this weird balance as an indie creator, especially at the conventions, to get people to come back. And the great thing about comic fans and comic conventions for me, and I'm not going to speak for Javier, but for me, is that they come back every year. And it's so nice. The comic fans are so loyal. And what I love about comics, and I've always believed this in my soul ever since I was young, is that comics knows no color. Comics knows no age, no sexuality, no gender. People love to get pulled into a good story. And I love that. I love walking around. That's my favorite thing about conventions, is going before the show opens and seeing something new, somebody I have never met or somebody whose work I've never seen, and just buying their book and just diving into it. And I just love that. Sorry, tangent.
No, that's actually a very good segue, because we're almost out of time. So we have about 5 minutes to go. So the fact that you threw out the word that it's good stories, good artwork, you have to make sure that's in there, because it's what is it, the cream rises to the top. And I've known you guys for a while, and both your stories, both your projects rise to the top. It's really good stuff, really good quality, and I think that's important to focus on. That it's not just you throw out anything; it's the time, energy, and effort, plus making it good and well received.
Thank you.
So let's see. Like I said, we have less than 5 minutes, so it's time to promote yourselves. So let's see, Javier, you got 2 minutes to promote yourselves of Kickstarter, any of that stuff, websites. Now's the time. Go. 2 minutes.
So I have a new short story that will be on Kickstarter soon. It is called Another Reason to Smile. I haven't been able to work that title out yet because I've been working on the artwork, but it's basically going to be a group of short stories in traditional comic book format instead of the hybrid format that I've used. And it's going to show every single character that's been in the Reason to Smile books. You're going to get to see their stories. So I'd love to share my screen really quickly. You could see some of the artwork that's going to be, it's going to be used. This is one of the images that shows all of the friends. You got Luisa in the middle with the green coquí symbol on her shirt. That's a native symbol of Puerto Rico. Surrounded by her friends. You've got Ewan on the left. You got Quentin in the back. Josephine is arm in arm with Luisa, with Taina behind her. And the series has been about Luisa this whole time. The next story is going to be about Kwame. It's going to be about his experience in America, with his parents being from Ghana, and how reading comics, the way that reading comics impacts his life.
Rich, 2 minutes. Go.
Okay, so I have a ton of books that I've written and drawn and done. Right now we're having a sale because Sentinels, we only have a couple of sets left. So all 4 books, the whole complete series, go to our store. We have a thing set up, all 4 volumes for only $25. You can add the anthologies, the Sentinels anthologies that we did later on. And we use the great thing about the anthologies is we use different writers and artists that I've met over the years at conventions and just online and through friends and stuff who volunteered to be involved. So you get different perspectives, the little short stories, but it doesn't involve the team. Sentinels, real quick, is a story of a 2nd generation team whose parents disappeared when they were young. And as they get pulled into the whole mystery, they discover what happened to the 1st generation. I also have many other books that you can find on the website, Bugs, Neverminds, Blessed Sons, but I also do artwork and at conventions. So here's some of my art. And I have these panel things that I started doing to bring people to notice my books. So this is some of the artwork that I've done over the years. And these are long panels and I sell them at shows. And I just started doing these younger, more stylized, cute, all ages drawings of different characters and stuff. So I'll have these at conventions too. These are smaller prints and they're just, different style. So
and people order those stuff on your website?
Artwork, I do not have a website for, but they can message me through my website or at Rich Bernatovech. That's RichBernatovech on Instagram. You can see a lot of my art there. I'm on DeviantArt. Everything is available through drumfishproductions.com. So you can contact me, write me there, and see my convention schedule on the websites too.
All right, so we're now final thought time. So this is the end of the Q&A. Thank you everybody for participating. Javier, you have any final thoughts you want to get out there?
I just wanted to share something really quickly. This is the quality of the work you see from an indie. So each rectangle is a page. On the right side is the narrative, and then the art is on the left. But you see 44 pages here. This is the work that you'll get to see in viewing A Reason to Smile Volume 2, going into the short story. I just want to tell good stories. I want to make you guys smile. I want to make you happy with the lives you live. I want you to recognize the happiness that you have in your life. If you don't see it, I want you to be able to find that. And I hope that my stories can help inspire that.
And people can buy books and prints because you said you do artwork. Can you buy it on your website?
So on thecurve.com, that showcases everything from when I first started being at the conventions to what I do now. There's a section for the books, there's a section for the fan art, there's a section for you to contact me and let me know what you'd like to get done. And a lot of the work that's on that site is custom. A lot of that is done with your ideas coming to light and saying, hey, I want to see this happen. How much does that cost? And we make it happen.
Awesome. So Rich, final thought?
Thank you for having me on the show. And it's been a lot of fun to be here, especially with Javier. And I appreciate what you guys do. I loved going to the library a couple of years ago when you had me over there and hosted. I'm excited for conventions to start up again. If anybody goes to New York Comic Con or is in the area or goes to any other show that you see me at, please say hello and tell me that you heard me on the radio. I am happy to sell my books, my artwork through my websites, and I love reading new stuff. So if you're a young creator or an older creator or whoever you are and you're doing stuff, stop by my table or write me, and I love taking a look at stuff. And I hope that our journeys inspire you to do what we're doing, to do exactly what we're doing now.
All right. So my final thought, as I mentioned, you guys are really awesome people. I really love your stuff. Make sure everybody goes out and buys their stuff. Buy everything. Just go there, buy everything. Just buy it all out. So I know there's more stuff coming up for the Emcon Animefest. So Kelly, you want to throw it out there? What other programs they got coming on tonight?
Oh, yeah, no doubt. Yes, we're going to have the cat girl Kawaii, hip-hop artist herself. We're going to have the Gata Negra starting at a little bit after 8. So stay tuned for that. God bless everyone. Thank you guys for showing up for this evening. I really appreciate it, and I love hearing your stories. Thank you. God bless.
All right. So if anybody else likes the content, make sure you go to www.eastmeadow.info, like, share, and subscribe, all that fun stuff. They have tons of programming all the time. And for those who's watching this on YouTube, it's the Emcon Animefest. Once again, www.eastmeadow.info. So thank you, everybody, for coming. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.